Here we go. And now we're live on the correct YouTube channel. So hello, everyone. I'm in a library here in Utah, just working outside of the, away from the home today because the kids recently got out of school. And it's really easy for them to think that dad's out of school now too. And have to interrupt me while I'm working, which I normally don't mind, but I do need to get work done. Also, just to apologize in advance if I look like I'm really sleepy, because I am. I got home from the Canary Islands 2 days ago, or like 30 hours ago-ish, and still feeling quite sleepy from that long trip and some jet lag. So I apologize in advance for that, I guess. But yeah, if you've never been to Office Hours before, this is your chance to ask me questions about really anything software related, or anything really, career, whatever. Just happy to help. And yeah, so feel free to ask me whatever. And I will do my best to tell you first whether I will be of any use, because sometimes people ask questions that I cannot answer. But yeah, I'll do my best to answer questions. I give priority to people who are in the Zoom call, and then I answer questions that are in the Office Hours Discord channel. So with all that said, I believe that the only question we have, let me double check this. I see, Alyssa, that you're in here. Hello. I'll get to your question first. I just want to see where we are in the Discord as well. Yeah, okay, that's fine. And that's good. I do not understand that, but I guess I could stick that in Google Translate. So great. Let's start with you, Alyssa. Do you want to just ask me your question, or do you want me to read through this?
Yeah, we can do that. I just wasn't sure if I was going to be able to attend or not. So I was like, let me just outline it there. Yeah, so I'm just working on a hackathon project, and it's with this like backend as a service called AppWrite. And so it's like, let me use Remix. So, because that's when I actually get to use these frameworks and things. So I just had a few questions that kind of came up as I'm working through that. Just kind of want to learn some best practices and things. So yeah, so we can start with that first one, which is just, I basically want to have like a URL structure that has the domain /user/settings. And I just want, but I don't really want anything at the like /user route particularly. I just kind of want that URL structure. And I was curious if the proper way to do that in Remix. I looked at the docs, and I wasn't sure if the like _dot settings, like I can get the link to render fine. It's just, I don't know if that's the best practice, or if y'all have a way.
Yep, that's the correct way to do that. Okay. I always have to reference the docs when looking at the convention to make sure that things are right. But the best thing that you can do after you have gotten things set up the way that you think you want to, is you run npx remix routes, and it will spit out the routes for your app based on the file structure that you've got, which can be really helpful. So you say, okay, here's my routes, here's my, slash route, and then /forgot password is going to be this file. And then we've got nested stuff. So admin cache SQLite, that's /admin cache SQLite, and then it has a child route for the cache key, stuff like that. So yeah, that can be super helpful. I typically have to just tinker around with things until like, okay, yeah, this is the structure that I want.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Because I was like, I went to like /user just to test and see, and I wasn't, it shows a 404, but I was like, I guess that's desired because people can still go there. It's just making sure. Okay, that makes sense. I had no idea that npx remix routes was even
it's so pretty handy. What I would suggest is that you do create a route that handles /user.
Okay.
And all that it does is redirects to some page, or maybe it shows like a useful error message that says this doesn't exist, or some generic 404 thing that you want.
Gotcha.
Because people, I don't know about other people, but I am a curious person, and I will experiment with routes in apps that I use sometimes. So
cool. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. My next question is about like say I have like a header and a footer, like something I just want global components that I want just kind of accessible everywhere. Is the root TSX file like the best place to put that, or is just kind of dependent on, I guess, how your app is constructed?
Yeah, so there are a couple of thoughts here. First, you should be able to just import components anywhere and use those. You don't need to have them imported in root, but I'm guessing you're asking about like the CSS for those components.
Yeah, because those, I guess I want it so that I don't have to always import it, or I want them accessible, I think, everywhere.
Oh,
The header will just change based on like if you're logged in or not. So like, I'm just curious if, yeah, if root was the best place to kind of.
oh, I see what you mean. Yeah,
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 sure. So for components that are like you want on every page.
yeah, yeah.
Got it. Let's see. So here's the root TSX of the Epic stack, and it's rendering a body, and it's got a header and all of that stuff in the root. And this works out nicely here. Let's run it so we can look at what we're talking about here. Oh, right, I messed something up. I don't know what I messed up. I should probably pretty sure the app should work. I don't know what I messed up, but we'll see if it works. I messed something up. I'll have to look at that later. But anyway, yeah, just like this sort of thing, header and stuff. The drawback of putting that in root is that if you ever have a page that you don't want those things to appear, then you're left with either having to add some logic to those components to like not render anything on special pages, which I don't think is a great idea. It's not a terrible idea. In fact, you wouldn't even have to put that logic in the component. You could just have there's this fancy thing called handle for routes, and you could have a special handle property that you say, for this route, I don't want to show the header, but it just seems kind of like a weird thing to do.
Yeah.
And so what you could do is something similar to this. Well, so this is going to be a little bit of information. So the Epic Stack is a starter project that I'm working on that it has like all of the things that I would start with when I'm building an app, and it's awesome. But yeah, there's a bit in it, and one of the things that's in it is I'm using Remix flat routes, not the built-in Remix convention. So you'll see I'm ignoring all files and saying no routes should exist, and then I'm using the custom route config so that I can generate flat routes. So just using a different convention that's very similar, but it has this one feature in it that I really like that allows you to have some nesting of folders with this little plus. So if you've got a bunch of files that all have the same prefix, you can actually just make a folder with that prefix, add a plus to it, and then put all those files in there and remove the prefix. So otherwise, all of these would be _auth for all of this stuff, which is like just really repetitive and kind of annoying. Sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of nesting. So this is called hybrid routes, and it is just really a nice hybrid of co-location that we like from the Remix v2 routes, and also being able to nest when necessary. So all of that said, to say here I should bump this up a little bit. In the Epic stack, we have this _marketing section. And so there's actually no layout route here. So because it's got that prefixed underscore. So none of these are nested in any sort of layout, but you could do the same thing by having the underscore at the end and say, okay, we're going to have this this actual URL. So like just because it's a folder doesn't mean you don't have access to all of the other features. Anyway, so you could have a layout route in here that says, okay, so everything under this directory and under here is going to have this header and this footer. And then that would allow you to say, oh, actually, I need a page that doesn't have a header and footer. I'm going to put it outside of that. And so that would be a way to do that. But as you can see, the way that I'm doing this for this for the Epic stack is I'm just sticking stuff in here because it's pretty uncommon to have that sort of need. Sorry. Yeah. it's not really that necessary to do that from the start. Like this is totally fine. And then what if you ever did need to say, oh, I need to have like this route that doesn't have the header and footer, it's pretty easy to just take everything, move it into a layout route, and then put everything in a folder like that or something, and then move on with your life. So anyway, that's a long way to answer your quick question.
No, you're good. That makes sense. Yeah, the thing I'm building, it's kind of on a time crunch. It's pretty simple. It doesn't really have that many routes. I was just kind of curious, but that's good to know. And that's cool that Remix kind of gives you that flexibility to kind of create your own system there, or to ignore kind of the default stuff. And
Yeah. Have your own convention. I like it.
Yeah, your own convention. Yeah. So 3 is really long, so I'll summarize it. Basically, I'm trying to do like an auth workflow, and I'm kind of new to that. And so I read your article on like authentication in React applications, where you kind of have like the use auth hook. And so my initial like idea was like I was trying to reference the hook in like have that the action gets called when you submit to like register, and then like reference the hook. And then I realized like, oh, you can't call, because that runs on the server, you can't actually call hooks. Yeah. So I guess my question is like AppWrite, the backend as a service, like has a client that you have to like initialize, and then it exposes like different help, or it has an SDK that you can use to like get different methods. And so my thinking was like, I'll just create kind of like an AppWrite util file, and then like an auth util file that like calls that like makes those calls to the AppWrite SDK, I guess, in the back. So like I don't really need the hook, I guess, is what I'm trying to, I guess I was trying to figure out like, how do I was thinking initially the use auth hook would like have the register function, login, all that kind of stuff, but I wasn't sure if like, okay, maybe if I just extract that out into maybe just a utility file and then reference that from the action, that might be more of the better approach. Is that kind of
yeah? So you said
that makes sense. Sorry.
No, that's right. So AppWrite has a client. Is this just like a regular JavaScript thing, or is it a React specific thing?
It's just regular JavaScript, and I can. I don't know if you want. I can send the link in Zoom. I don't know if it's helpful.
Maybe I think I can answer this. So the other question is, does that JavaScript client for AppWrite, does that work on the server side, or does it have to be client side?
It does work on. I believe it does work on the server side, because I think I was actually playing around with it. Yeah, and it does.
Yeah, sweet. That is the way it should work. So with that, I presume you give it like a username and email, or a username and password, and it gives you back some sort of token or something. Is that right?
Yeah, like it creates this session, or yeah, it gives you back some type of confirmation, like a object thing that confirming, and then from there you can kind of
okay. And so anytime you need to talk to AppWrite, you send this token to indicate it's authenticated. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I think yeah, they have like a getter method, I think, that you can use to check if like the user has a session and all that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe you should, if you could send me a link.
Yeah, let me send it in Zoom. That would be.
Yeah, so lots of services that implement authentication for you, or like package that, make a lot of assumptions about the way you're building your app. And unfortunately, the assumptions that have been made for the last half decade or more have been that you're building a client-side app, and that you don't have access to server code or something, which is a huge shame, because it means that you're really limited on your capabilities and things. So yeah, oh, here it is. Sweet. Let's take a look.
The account
so if I post, create an account, cool. Okay. Huh. Yeah, their examples are kind of funny. So you get a session object. Okay.
Yeah, they give you different. I'm just doing email password. Let's keep it simple.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Yeah. If you're just doing email password, I kind of, wow, man, they got all kinds of things. Phone session. My word. What? Jeez. And then you've got JOTs.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you get an account,
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, because I assume these are all things I need to run on the server. So I was just thinking like, if I just have a util function that, initializes the client and then, makes these calls to these things and then just call that from the action. Is that kind of the approach you would take?
yeah, the thing I'm looking for is there doesn't appear to be anything in here that allows you to specify a token or something. And so like I was expecting create an email session. So you're doing email and password, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, here, just like that. Okay, cool. So create an email session. So
I guess
yeah,
that's
it doesn't look like the response has
access to.
okay. No, there's yeah. Okay. So I'm just not seeing where you pass that access token to all these requests. And so what I'm assuming, because all these other authenticated requests don't show that you pass a access token, is that once you do this create email session and once this promise resolves, now any request made by this client is going to be authenticated, which I do not like at all, because this very much seems like the sort of thing where they're assuming that you're running this in the browser instead of a server. This is, yeah, like Firebase does the same thing. And it's just extremely limiting, because what it means is the reason that they can do this, where they say, okay, here, make a client, make an account thing. What is the account? What does that thing even do? I don't even know what that account does. But and then you say, here's my endpoint, here's my project. Now create an email session. Once this promise resolves, like at this point, this account or this client is now authenticated. And so you can make requests from this client and everything will be great because it's authenticated. But the problem is when the user's making a bunch of different requests and a bunch of different loaders, you'll have to go through this whole process in every one of those. You make a new, like within the loader, you make a new client in the loader, and then you say, okay, now that I've authenticated this client, now I can make a request. What's much better is if the user signs in, you get the response that has the provider token, and then from there, every request you make, you just use the provider token. You don't have to authenticate every time.
Just store that like in a cookie or something. Like
yeah, you would probably put that well in a cookie or in a database table. I would.
Okay.
I mean, you're not going to have a users table, right? Like you're not going to have your own database. You're just going to be using AppWrite.
Yeah.
Okay. So you just put the token in a HTTPS only cookie. So the client-side JavaScript can't access it. It's just server-side stuff. It's more secure that way. And then, and then you could use that request or that with every request that you're making. So a couple options here. One option is you just lean into the assumption that it seems that they're making, oh, hold on a second. We're looking at client. There's also a server. Okay, this changes everything.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
so they've got a JOT. That's probably fine if that's the only option.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I did notice they had a server thing, but I wasn't quite sure how to delineate.
Yeah. Okay, this changes everything. Yeah, what I was about to tell you was you either just lean into the client side thing and give your users a worse user experience, or what was the other thing I was going to say? I can't even remember now because this is way better. So what you do here is, let's see, get an account. Where do we log in? Create session. Here.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what they call it.
Some of the API to do when you authenticate with JOT, this allows you to perform server-side stuff.
This get account looks like register, I assume. Let me
mhm.
here.
Okay, so what I suppose it, oh, get session? No, we want to create a session.
Yeah.
Mm. So we list, get, delete, update, and delete multiple. Okay, well, I think my guess is this client, because there was a jot thing here also.
Yeah.
Yeah, create jot. There it is. Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think maybe you will do something like this, and then the response will give you a jot object, and you'll store that token in their cookie. And then every time the request comes in your action, you just make a utility that takes that request and pulls that cookie value out and gives you a client that has the jot already set up. So your utility will be something like this, except instead of a hard-coded jot, of course, you would do request.headers.get cookie, parse that to get the jot value. You could do that manually, or you could use the utilities that Remix provides. That would work fine. There are, let's see. So the Epic stack has authentication all built in, and so there might be some things that are helpful to you in here.
Okay.
For example, where is our, yeah, the auth server is probably not very helpful. Session server might be a little bit helpful. There's not much to it here, but you can look at how this session storage is used. And so you'd probably do something similar to this. I might, call it the same sort of thing. That's fine. And then auth server here. It's a good thing this is recorded because I'm going through a ton of stuff, but you can watch this later.
Yeah, this would be great.
Yeah, so my auth stuff is using a package called Remix Auth. So you're probably not going to do that. Well, I don't know. Maybe yeah, why not? Sure, you could. Yeah, you could do the same sort of thing. In here, I'm creating my own session in the database, but you would, this is where you would do, go authenticate to get the jot, and you would return the jot value. I would set the session key to be not session ID, but jot, app write jot or something to make it more descriptive. And so then your authenticator can be used in your actions and stuff. And I've got a utility for this. Actually, I think it's in here that I would suggest you use all over the place. So where's require use? Yeah. So I have this utility require user ID. For you, I think it'd probably just be require client or something like that. So you can get the entire client object. Where here I do a little bit of setup stuff to handle redirects, because often if I'm going to log the user out, or like if I'm saying, hey, the user has to be logged in to be able to do this. So if they're not, I want to send them to the login screen, and then the login screen, I want that to send them back to where they were before. So that's what this is doing, is it's setting up the redirect to URL. So if the user is sent to the login, then they can come back. Anyway, the important part is first we check with the authenticator object from Remix Auth whether this request is authenticated. That's going to get us, in my case, the session ID. In your case, that should give you the client. I'm pretty sure that is the case. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I could return like a complex object here. I don't think this is serialized or anything. Yeah, where did we go? Whoops. Oh, it's right there. So yeah, you'd get your client, and then from there, I think actually you just return the client, probably. Yeah, you'll have to play around with it a little bit, but this should hopefully help a little bit if you want to check out the Epic stack.
Yeah.
And here, I'll just grab a link to that. really quick here and stick it in Discord. And then also, if you haven't already gone through the app tutorial.
I've been looking at that.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, so this we build authentication from scratch and without using Remix Auth. That might be pretty helpful to through as
I was
well.
looking at how you were doing that. So yeah, that was what I was about to say. I was like, I was actually been following the tutorial, trying to kind of see, because it seems like, well, I've never really had to implement my own auth, and this is just a little, pet project, and you're required for the hackathon to use AppWrite. So I'm trying to utilize as many of their services as possible. But
totally.
trying to it kind of overwhelms me a little bit with auth because I just don't want to screw it up. But I think it's maybe it's not as crazy as I think it is. But so I think just
authentication is scarier than it is for sure. Or it seems scarier than it actually is. I from what I saw there, they have thought about the server. That is really nice. That they've done that. So you get the jot, you stick it in a cookie, you get that cookie value, and create a client based on that with every action or every loader as well and stuff. That's the basic idea.
Okay, because what you were going to say, like initially when you were thinking they only had the client side thing, just to make sure I understand, like the pitfalls of that approach would have been that like I have to always kind of grab that client, whereas now I can kind of like store the jot somewhere. And is that kind of what you were going
to? So the major pitfall with it being like a client only thing, the major pitfall with having to create a client and that client is the authenticated thing. The problem with that is a server can't have more than, well, the way that you would do that in a web browser is like you just make one client and you can use that all over the app because there's only one user that's logged in at a time. Whereas on the server, you've got like who knows how many users are making requests to the server. And so you can't just have one client. And so that means you have to make one client per person. And the only reasonable way to do that, I mean, there are some weird things you could do, but like the only reasonable way to do that would be to create the client at request time. But then you would have to store the username and password so you can, create the client every time. So of course you wouldn't want to do that. And so, that's and the whole pitfall with just saying, okay, well, let's just do it in the client now in the browser is that now you can't do server rendering of any user data. And so you end up just rendering loading spinners everywhere, which is just terrible UX. I'll also mention actually another thing that you'll find useful in the Epic stack is we've got this user TS utility in the miscellaneous or utils directory that has a couple really handy utilities. So there's use optional user, which you can use for all of the like pages where the user doesn't have to be logged in. Maybe the app you're building, it's like every page they need to be logged in except maybe the login screen. For lots of apps, you have pages that are used for both. And then there's also this use user that will throw an error if there's no user found. That helps a lot with TypeScript typings so that if you're on a page where you're like, they absolutely have to be logged in to be able to see this page anyway, there's like, if they are not logged in and they're seeing this UI, then something is terribly wrong. And so that's why we can throw this error. And that makes it so we go from this user object that could be null or undefined down to a user object that could not possibly be null or undefined because we checked for that. And then actually where we get that, so this is used in our UI code that server renders as well as runs in the browser. Where we get that is going to be actually from our root TSX where we're doing the user authentication. So we get the user ID, we grab the user, based on that ID, and we return that in here. So we're able to pull that user data out of the root loader for any of our components anywhere. So those are associated pretty directly. Where did I go? I can't see my files. Man, Zoom is in my way.
Go away. Bar at the top,
Okay. Yes, there it is. So yeah, you'll see here that I'm actually importing the type of the root loader. And then I have this use root loader or use route loader data passing root. That's the ID of the that route is root. So I'm getting the root data. So this can be used in any component at any level of my tree because all of them are underneath the root. So they all have access to the root loader. So that's why that works. So feel free to reference this and use whatever
Yeah, for sure.
this you'd like. I'm pretty sure you could be pretty happy just like copy pasting this entire file. And yeah, it's like, it's not a lot, but it's pretty useful. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think I just got to get used to the workflow and kind of, you know, yeah, everything. I think it'll click eventually. Yeah, no, that's very, very helpful. Thank you.
So on this last one about hydration,
yeah,
hydration is like super annoying. This is a super annoying error. So basically the idea behind this error is the let's say that on the server you are rendering something like a pink box, and then on the client, when so you send that HTML that has this pink box, and then it goes up to the client, and the client says, okay, here's the HTML, let me hydrate it, let me add a click event listeners and stuff like that. And when it's doing that, it's actually calling your JSX or your components to get JSX and stuff to create the first virtual DOM instance. And it's comparing that to the DOM that came from the server. And let's say that on the client, for some reason, instead of a pink box, it's a green box. And so it's going through and it's like, oh, you rendered a pink box on the server, but on the client, I'm rendering a green box. So that's not like, that's different. And that's fine. Like, it can go ahead and switch it to a green box, but it's a bad user experience because they're going to see, for a moment, they'll see a flash of a pink box. It'll go pink and then it'll go green. And that just like, the user's like, what's going on here? And so for that reason, React will be fine. It will just make it work, but it's going to give you this warning to say, hey, you've got a bad UX because these things are different. This unfortunately can happen for a lot of different reasons. Maybe it did render as a green box on the server, but instead of a green box, it's like a timestamp or something. And the server renders that one way, and then the client renders that a completely different way because we're in a different time zone or locale or something. So it formats it differently. That's still a problem because they're going to see the wrong format, and then it'll render and you'll see the right format. Or maybe it's a dark mode, light mode thing, like you don't know what their user's preference is. And so like there are a lot of things like that. Or maybe it's something that's completely outside of your control, period, because they're using some browser extension that modifies the HTML before React has a chance to hydrate. So even if you sent the right server HTML and the client is exactly the same on that initial render, if the browser extension changed some of that DOM stuff, then React is going to come through and be like, oh, this is different. I'm going to let you know because like there's going to be some sort of flash here. And so that in that case, like you can't do anything. You just like say, sorry. The nice thing about those is they don't often make a lot of visual changes. Like those extensions don't often make visual changes. And even if they do, the users who install them are kind of used to things bumping around with their extensions anyway. So it's like, whatever. Yeah, one of the problems with this though is it's not just something you can just ignore, because even if you're like, I'm fine, it's not really changing anything visually or whatever, because what happens when React runs into this is it kind of throws up its hands and it says, I can't use what came from the server because it's wrong, it's different from what I'm expecting, so I'm going to throw away all of that stuff, and instead of just like hooking up event handlers, we're going to recreate the whole DOM, boom. And that is not great for performance, which is unfortunate. So when you see stuff like this, you do want to figure out what the difference is. And here's how you do that. you will go to, I wish that my, this app was working. That's super annoying. Let's try Rocket Rental, I guess. Here, and we'll stop this. I need to figure out why that app is not working. Okay, there we go. So Rocket Rental, it's completely free of this error. Let's do something that will break this, and then we'll figure out what how to debug it. So we'll go to our root TSX, and we'll go. This is something you would of course never do, but just for our demo purposes, we'll do this. So is server type of document undefined. There we go. So right here, we'll stick this in the header or below a header. Is server client. Okay, great. So that's going to obviously be different between the two. Okay, so now if I refresh, you'll see it actually flashes from server to client. That's the thing here. Let's get rid of the warning. So you know, it's like between the time that I get the HTML from the server and the time the client hydrates it, I see the word server and then it switches to client. That's not good. And we're getting this like enormous freaky error that, yeah, really should just say text content didn't match. And it would be really cool if it also told you exactly where that was. I mean, it kind of tries. Yeah, it's like not too bad, but it's still not great. So anyway, so how do we figure out what's going on here? This is what I do. First of all, I'm going to see if this will work because this has not been working for me, but disable JavaScript. Yeah, see, I disabled JavaScript. It still is working. I don't know why I disabled it, but yeah, it's not working. So unfortunately, that is not going to work. So what we'll do instead is we're going to come down here and we're going to just comment out the script tag. So what that's going to do, there we go, is now I'm not hydrating anymore. So I can take this and copy that element, copy outer HTML, and go to diff checker and stick that here. So this is what my server HTML looks like. Awesome. One thing that you could also do is actually open up view source and copy that. So you actually don't have to disable the JavaScript. So that is one thing. Another thing that I'll do is we'll go to prettier and we will go to format this HTML just so that the diff looks a little nicer because like this is garbage. No thanks. So we'll stick that in there.
Gotcha.
After sticking it through prettier. Okay, so now that we have the server HTML, let's get the client. This one you can't use view source because view source will always be what the server sends you. It's not going to hydrate or anything. So now once we have it hydrated and everything, we can copy this, copy outer HTML, stick that in prettier first to get it nice and formatted, and then stick it in here, and then find the difference. And boom, there we can see what the difference is. Also, unfortunately, we got a bunch of other things that are different, which is, yeah, this is actually unfortunate. Yeah, let me explain what's probably going on here. Yeah, man. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Hold on a second. Yeah, did not expect this difference. That is weird. Huh. Hold on a second. Oh, yeah, that is busted. Oh, I know what's going on. So because of hydration, you'll notice the stars in the background, they appear and then they disappear. Yeah, that's probably not going to happen in your app. I'm doing something weird for the stars. So ignore this part. Okay. But you will notice there are a couple of things in here that you're like, that should not be different. Those should definitely be the same. So what's going on with this, and this very likely could happen for you, is I'm using some components that have a use effect that will do something after hydration is done. that is totally cool. That's fine. As provided that they don't really make any visual difference, because if they do, then you'll still have that flash of change, right? That we don't want. But this is just adding a tab index. It's adding some style stuff. I'm not sure why it's doing that. It looks like it actually just moved some properties, that's not going to be a big problem. This right here just formatted differently, which is strange, but it's not a big deal. The width and height somehow got added here, but that's sometimes you have animations when they first load in. Like when I was debugging here, I had a problem with the fact that I was animating right here. And so my before and after was quite different, because the first thing that I do is animate. So the problem is that we're getting a couple of things that are going to be different. Oh, also, here's another one. These IDs are generated, so they'll literally be different every single time as well. So sometimes when you're doing this diff check, you're going to see things and you're like, I'm pretty sure that's fine.
Right. Okay.
One thing that you could do to check that is just have do the server rendered HTML and do 2 copies of that. Like, so get one and then refresh and get the other and see what's different between those two. And you're like, okay, so here are a couple of things that are generated. I can ignore those things. Those are fine. Yeah, so we'll have a couple of things like this that don't actually change anything visually. And they probably will happen in a use effect. The problem is you can't really know whether it's happening in a use effect or not if you're just looking at here's what the server rendered and then here's what happened after hydration, because use effect runs at that point. So to really get this down to like exactly what happened when hydration, like what broke hydration, is you need to have some mechanism to stop the JavaScript from executing between the time that it's hydrated and the time that those use effects run. And you can, and so that you can copy the HTML and do that comparison, because everything that happens after use effect is fine. Like that's not what's causing your problems. So you need to stop it before use effects run to verify that you're getting what you expect. So there are a couple of ways to do this. There's one way that's really complicated and one way that I think might work. We're going to try the way I think will work first, because it's a lot easier.
Okay.
That is in your app directory or in your app component, like the top level thing. I'm pretty positive, it's been a while, but pretty positive that the use effect here will run before anything else, before all the rest of the use effects. And in fact, yeah, we could actually probably use layout effects, would probably be even better. You'll get a server warning about this, but it should work. And I think they're actually removing that server warning because use layout effects shouldn't be used on the server. But like I said, I think they're removing that. In any case, it should still work even with the server warning. So we'll use layout effect with the debugger statement in here. And now that we have this debugger, none of the other use effects should have run by now. And so we can go to our elements. It's paused here. We can go to our elements and copy this now before the rest of the use effects run. And we'll stick that down. Oh, first in prettier to get it so that our output looks nicer. And then find the difference. Okay, so we still get that. Let's see. Looks like we still have some. Yeah, some of these are going to be different. I think that those are, I think these are using React's use ID hook. And so those are probably updating, and that's fine.
That's the radix component, right? That's a third party. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like these changes are still there. These are the changes I was hoping we would get rid of, because I think these are added in a use effect, but it might not be. Maybe they're doing something else. Or maybe this is not working the way I was hoping it would. Maybe the parent components use effects run after the children. I can't remember now. Okay, so here's another thing. Another thing that we could try is in our root or our entry client. I can't remember if our use effects run after hydrate root. So here, let's actually add this back. Let's see where those breakpoints hit. Okay, so here, this is what the DOM looks like before we do any hydration. So we could copy this and be like, okay, I haven't hydrated the root yet. Let's see what it looks like. And then we're going to play through. And yeah, so it looks like hydrate root has run. We don't have any errors yet. So that's cool. That's interesting. Why don't we have errors? Maybe this is async. Huh. That's weird. Yeah, I don't know, actually. Let's copy this. Whoops. Stick this in prettier first. Find the difference. I think. That is so interesting. We are still getting these link tags and scripts and stuff that we. Oh, I know why. That's because I removed this. I commented out the scripts element. That's what's going on. Silly me. Okay, here, let's do this. I'm gonna copy this. Whoops. And stick that in prettier. Sorry, now our diff is gonna look a lot more correct. Okay, there we go. So now we don't have the changes with those links and stuff. So that's good. So yeah, just use the use source when you're getting the server side thing. That's way better. Okay, so then all of these diffs I happen to know are because we are randomly generating the star field every time. And so it is going to be different for both the client and server. It doesn't make a difference. That star field is going to be different every time. So yeah, the rest of this, yeah, here's a tip. Do not worry about this right here. The server is going to, like, some encodings are going to make an apostrophe look like this nonsense text. React does not care. I dove deep into this for like an hour, and then I realized, oh, React doesn't actually care about that. So if you see funny stuff with the text like this, that is not a difference that matters. So ignore that. Another interesting difference that doesn't matter is nonce attributes. So if you are familiar with nonce attributes, it's for content security policy stuff. They're kind of interesting and fun. But the interesting thing about the nonce is the server will send the nonce, and then the browser will actually remove those attributes before they get into the DOM. And so you'll look in the DOM and you'll be like, these nonce attributes don't have any value. And that's actually by design. And React does actually ignore the fact that, well, React doesn't ignore anything about that. But you will not see the nonce in the DOM, but you will see it in what the server is rendering. And yeah, if you're using nonce stuff, just look at Epic Stack and how we do it, because it's kind of a complicated thing. But yeah, that only matters if you're doing content security policy, which I'm guessing for the app that you're building, it's probably outside of the scope of what you're doing. So anyway, that was just another thing that hung me up on figuring out hydration errors. Was like, oh, the nonce is gone. What happened to that? And I spent another hour or two on that. Okay, anyway, so from the look of it though, we do not have any difference. And that's because the thing that I said was our client stuff has not been hydrated yet. So it turns out that this will not work either. You cannot put a debugger after hydrate root to see what the post client stuff is, because it hasn't actually hydrated by this point. So at this point, I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure that the use layout effect thing that I did in the app component will work.
Okay.
That will give you a spot where you can get a breakpoint, get all the HTML, and compare it to the server HTML. And what you see should mostly just be changes that are before use effects. So there you go. See, I should preface Office Hours by saying this is unrehearsed and unpracticed stream of consciousness knowledge stuff.
Well, it works out that I think I'm still the only one here, and there weren't too many questions. So, or else I would probably have skipped that one because I don't want to take up too much time. But it's fun to kind of, and it's good to kind of get, go deep into the weeds.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. So yeah, a lot of people will see that. And one thing that you can do, sometimes people will do, is they'll say suppress hydration warning.
Mm,
And by sticking that on the HTML, you will literally never get the warning, but
okay.
that does not solve the problem.
Right.
You're just you're making yourself completely unable to
Hmm,
to be notified when there's a problem like this.
I see.
So that attribute is useful in some situations. Remix uses it internally in a couple places, but yeah, you really don't want to use that
Okay.
if you can help it.
Yeah.
The warning actually does mean something.
Okay. I need to look into it then. Yeah. Maybe what I'll do is because it's littering up the console as I'm developing. So maybe when I have more time to kind of dive into it, like maybe I'll suppress it temporarily or not.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I
If
usually try
it's
not to ignore errors because I'm like, okay, what am I
yeah,
doing?
yeah,
But
good call.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
the other one, I have another error, but I think it's an extension I have is just kind of doing something weird just based on how it reads. It sounds like an extension error. So I'm not too worried
Mm.
about that. But the hydration one I'm seeing, yeah, so that wasn't
Yeah,
familiar.
well, it sounds like if you're seeing this in just one browser,
Mhm.
that sounds like it's probably an extension that's
Mm,
causing that. One thing that you could try is pull up an incognito version, or I don't know what
yeah.
Firefox calls that, but just disable the extension or something and see if that fixes it. And if that's the case, then you're like your hands are tied, like you can't do anything about that.
Okay. Yeah, gotcha.
I guess you could use a framework that doesn't do hydration and switch over to Quick instead. Uh, but I mean, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I like these projects as kind of like learning how to, use remix and stuff. I'm really understanding why like you rave about it so much because it's like the fact that I don't have to use so much state and all this. It's so nice and I'm getting better like familiarized with like forms and stuff because I think we're just so
Mm,
used to doing everything, throw this in state and on click and it's just nice to like be like, oh, okay, I can just kind of grab it. Yeah, it reduces kind of the amount of things you need to keep track of on your own, I guess.
yeah, yeah,
That's nice.
completely agree. That's
Yeah,
awesome. I'm
yeah,
glad that you're liking it.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Awesome. Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate
Yeah,
this.
yeah, totally. I just noticed you have a Brazil flag behind you.
It is Jamaica, actually.
Oh, Jamaica, Jamaica. I knew
Yeah,
that.
my
Yeah.
parents are Jamaican, so this the
Oh, cool.
homage to
Yeah,
them. So yeah, yeah,
nice. Good stuff.
yeah. Awesome. Thank
Cool.
you.
Yeah, thanks for the questions.
Of course.
Okay, we've got Sil Bliss asked in Discord here how to make a MERN stack that's Mongo, Express, React, and Node. So MERN stack app response time for fetching APIs. For example, if user hits the login API from North America and the server is deployed in China, how to improve the response time for that North American use? How does my website handle that? Well, this is something that I've been very interested in recently. There are a couple of things that you can do. So one thing you could do is have like some sort of gateway sort of thing that's close to, like, you deploy these all over the world, and then the user connects to the one that's closest, and then that one has like super fast internet connection to all the way around the world, and so that can make it faster. Of course, you wouldn't do that yourself, probably, but that is effectively what Fly does. So just by deploying on Fly to a single region, you get that benefit. You can also just deploy to all those different regions, and so that brings in a multi-region or multi-instance app, which brings along a fair number of additional complexities and limitations on your app. Like if you're using volumes for your app, so persisted files and things, then that can be a challenge, because now you've got to make sure that either those files are not required to be on every instance, or you somehow propagate those files to every instance. So that can be a problem. If you in particular, that's going to be an issue with SQLite, because SQLite is a file that lives on a volume. And so there are solutions to that with LiteFS, and that's what I'm doing with my personal site. I use LiteFS with Fly and SQLite, and it's amazing. So yeah, I've got a course on that actually on Epic Web Dev. It's the first, what is it called? What do I call it? Tutorial. There we go. So you could go through this. This is effectively how I do multi-region data and deployment. So everything in this section is how I do multi-region stuff. Alternatively, if you're just using like a single database in a single region, you can still deploy to multiple instances. But the problem there is now the user talks to the instance that's closest to them, but then that instance needs to go all the way around the world to get the data. So it's still like maybe going to be faster, but that really depends on a lot of things. Like if they go to the instance that's close to them and then it needs to make one query, then that's probably faster. But if they need to make a lot of queries, then it's probably slower because every single one of those queries is going to be a long trip around the world. Whereas if you just started with the user going all the way around the world to the one instance, then they can talk to the database really close and then come back. So it really depends. If you're going to do distributed app, you should probably do distributed data, or it's very possibly going to make things worse. So a couple of things to think about. As far as MERN, now we're talking about Mongo. I don't know how data replication works with Mongo. I think like you can do like, what is sharding? I've heard of sharding. I don't think that applies here. I believe that's like, that's more scaling or yeah, making your database hold more stuff, I think. But yeah, I don't know whether there's a data replication solution there. I don't believe there's one on Fly. So yeah, at some point, like the problem is when you're making, so I'm not sure how to help you because you're using the MERN stack. Now, if you're using Epic Stack, I could help you there. This is actually a solved problem in the Epic Stack. Using MERN stack, I'm not sure what to do for you there. So at some point, when you don't have distributed data, and you just have to decide who in the world is going to have the slower version of my app. And that is an unfortunate world to live in. So there's not really a lot of things you can do to improve the response time for somebody on the opposite side of the world from you. So my short answer is don't use the Epic stack, not the MERN stack. Sorry. I'm pretty sure this is just a limitation of the MERN stack. But maybe there's data replication of Mongo that I'm not aware of. And if there was, then you'd have to figure out how to do that and then deploy multiple instances of your app to all over the world with the data close by. Okay, that's it. And that's our full office hours time. So I'm going to sign off. And I kind of want to take a nap, but I'm at the library. That'd be weird. So I'm not going to do that. But I'm not sure I'm going to go live just yet. I might go live this afternoon. So thanks everybody for joining. And I hope you all have a lovely day.